is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Season 3, Episode 7, Getting Over Jeff. In this episode, this is the first episode ever that does not have Josh's name in the title. And I feel like that is pretty significant considering the last episode was titled, Josh is Irrelevant. We're moving forward, kids. Progress. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Megan for commissioning this episode, and I am sorry, Megan, to be starting so late and to have no video on the Crowdcast for reasons that I can't begin to guess at. I have been having computer problems all day, and I am just hoping that this is going to record properly. And there's a fair amount of people in the chat, too, so I don't usually get this big a crowd, and for all of you to be here and it not work is extremely irritating. So there it is. And it's really extra too bad because this is a very interesting episode. It feels like what the show is deciding to do is move from Rebecca's obsession with Josh being a main focal point to sort of saying she is finally realizing that's not what it's about, and she is choosing to address that. And so now we're going to take a step back and look at the ways in which a lot of people focus on relationships and they hinge a lot of their happiness on them in ways that are not healthy. And that is some very real shit. It's hard for us, I think, as people, surrounded with the number of stories, movies, TV shows, books, etc., that are focused on romance. It's very hard to not see romance as being intrinsic to happiness. And I can't imagine if you're somebody who just doesn't really care about having that kind of relationship, how alienating it must be for everyone to be very focused on finding a partner when that really doesn't matter to you personally. And then there's people who they've started to realize that that's not what it's about, that it's about themselves and not relationships. But there's a very different process between intellectually knowing something and really being able to put into practice different priorities in your life. So what I really like, Owen, I think I've mentioned before, Owen has called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend the female Breaking Bad because it's about somebody who in other circumstances we probably would not like or root for, who has a lot of extremely problematic behaviors. And yet because we are inside their head and see their situation, we have a lot more sympathy than we would if we were looking at it all from the outside. And I think that this sort of is hand in hand with that, because this show does let us see the perspectives of multiple people and is so compassionate about that. It has the room to do some unusual things. So this whole episode, I won't even say focusing on Paula because that doesn't feel quite fair. But this episode really looking at Paula's situation specifically is addressing an issue that I think a lot of TV shows wouldn't. And I was talking about this with Rashawn, that there are so many tropes that we sort of take for granted are meant to be taken a certain way. And so we agree tacitly, yeah, okay, I will not really examine this, because I know that this show isn't interested in that. And so I'm not going to put my energy into examining that either. That's sort of an agreement that we have, that we're going to treat this behavior as kind of charming, even though in reality it's very upsetting. And what this show did this episode was say, hey, Paula, look, we know that you're not totally happy in the situation that you're in, but where does that come from? And how does that affect the people around you? Because we can look at you and say, that's very relatable, Paula. We also feel extremely overwhelmed and not really super interested in a lot of portions of our lives. And those things are not mutually exclusive. Something can be very relatable, but still be a problem. And it's very easy for us, especially in this age of like memes. I feel like it's very easy for us to be like, LOL, I just don't want to get out of bed ever again and feel like throwing myself off a bridge. Ha ha ha. Everybody else, hashtag same, hashtag mood. And we all just are sort of like, yeah, everybody wants to die. Isn't that funny? And not really take it any further than just being like, well, I guess everybody just hates existing. Cool. And leave it at that. So I think I expected the show to be like, Paula doesn't really care that much about her family, doesn't really want to be a mom, doesn't really enjoy the like domestic thing. LOL, who cares, right? Hashtag same. And instead the show is like, no. The thing is though, she chose to get married. She chose to have kids. She has made some decisions that now have other people relying on her. And other people have committed to her husband, and being one of them. And if that's true, that means that her not really seeming as committed herself is going to have some sort of effect on them. And I think we should address that and look at that, even though that's kind of an uncomfortable thing, because it's a really tricky thing in an age where women are, and I say in an age, women have always been subjected to tons of scrutiny for every decision that we make. So how do you look at a situation like this that is so fraught with the patriarchal expectations of motherhood and being a wife, and address the fact that somebody isn't really engaged without making it seem as if they're being criticized through a very patriarchal, antiquated lens? And I thought that they did a pretty good job of that. It's a very tricky line to walk. And what it comes down to, we find out, is that Paula had her heart broken in high school, I think it was, maybe college. I can't remember exactly how old she says she was. But this guy, Jeff, broke her heart, and she's always been sort of caught up in what could have been. There has been a real focus in her life on the ways in which her life would be different if things had worked out with him. So essentially, there's a vibe, it seems, that oh, I'm back. Sorry, guys. I wasn't on camera, but now it seems like I'm back. It's a good thing I wasn't like mid picking my nose or something. And this is one of those things that's really hard to put into words if you've never been with somebody who doesn't feel present in a relationship. But it is absolutely obvious when that's happening. And yet it is such a very it's so instinctive that trying to explain to somebody that you're feeling this way can often sound like you're overreacting or reading way too much into a lot of things. This was my feeling in my relationship with Brendan. It was part of the beginning of the end for us, was feeling like he wasn't in it with me. And I, as a result, began to detach myself. And by the time he sort of came back around and realized, oh, I'm about to lose her, I need to re-engage, I had detached so completely that it wasn't going to be savable anymore. Like, I had responded in kind, and I took it to 11. And I appreciate the way that her husband brings it up. So what happens is she is home and she is trying to just, talk to her kids about how her mother expects her to go and like babysit her dad who took a fall, and how ridiculous that is because her mom knows how much her dad annoys her. And really, I don't think Paula hears just how funny it is for her to be reacting this way after we just watched her sleep on the floor outside of Rebecca's bedroom. Like, we know that she's capable of giving up all of her time and energy to a person that she cares about. It's just this dude doesn't fall into that category for her particularly, which we see why later. And so she's behaving as if her mother expecting her to do this is so ludicrous, without really looking at how ludicrous it's been for her to treat Rebecca how she has. And she's making pancakes and expecting that the boys and her husband are going to be extremely like receptive to this and excited to have her back. And instead, it turns out that her husband and sons have a new routine that they started while she was busy with Rebecca. And they go and get a drive-through breakfast in the morning. So they're walking out the door and she's standing there with a bunch of pancakes like, what the fuck? And her husband says, look, I get that things have been going on with Rebecca, but every time something comes up, we come in second. It's not really like you're here consistently and there's an occasional emergency. It feels like us being a priority for you is much less frequent. And you look for reasons to not be involved with us. And she is extremely taken aback by this. There's also a tone to the way that he says it that makes it sound like he's very done with it. Like, this is a foregone theory. He knows for sure this is how she is, to the point that I won't say it doesn't bother him anymore, but he's come up with a coping mechanism that is so like ingrained now that the fact that she's only just realizing he has this coping mechanism, that's really the thing that's irritating him. Not the fact that she does this, but that she's so unaware that she does it, that she doesn't even notice the things that everybody around her is having to do in order to make up for it. And finally she starts to notice, and he's just like, really? Now you see it? Okay, we're going to go and get Egg McMuffins. Bye. And I just really, she says, I know I'm doing laundry, I'm flushing toilets, I'm helping with homework. And he says, yeah, but we don't know how long this is going to last. You go through phases. Before Rebecca, there were those vampire novels. There was Sudoku. There was the obsession with Amal Clooney's outfits. And there's always something you're obsessed with, and it's never us. We're like a chore. And she says, you're not a chore. This is my life, and I have accepted it. My life is chores and working and studying and never having enough time to finish the last season of Outlander, which becomes a theme for the rest of this episode. He says, I wasn't trying to start something. You're doing your best. But there's always been a part of you that feels like it's like you're not really there. And I think that more than anything, him saying, I'm not trying to start anything. I know you're doing your best. I think that is what slams it home. He's not even really like, it's not even really a criticism. It's just him being like, well, we're doing this because honestly, you don't really seem to want to do this. So this is how we're coping with it. And we're honestly just trying to make sure that things don't fall apart if you get re-obsessed with something else next time. And the fact that he says it in that way, after she's just said, I accept that my life is chores. And he says, well, I accept that you aren't really involved in our lives. That's rough. That's a hard thing to hear. And I don't know if Paula realizes how depressing it is to hear her say, I've accepted it. My life is chores and homework and like cleaning the house and working. But Paula, that's no way to live either, girl. What are you doing? Like, to a point. Yeah. That's just an unavoidable part of being alive. It's just feeling like I have to work. I have to do housework and stuff. But if you have reached a point where you're just like, I have accepted that my life is a chore, which is really what she's saying there. Yikes. You got to figure something out, kiddo. Like, that is not a way to move through the rest of your life. You've got another, God knows, 35, 40 years ahead of you. That's not a way to keep on keeping on. You got to do something, man. So eventually, Rebecca volunteers to go with her because she has decided that since she isn't appreciated by her family, that she will go and fulfill her daughterly obligation of watching over her father. So Rebecca offers to go with her. And the reason she does this is because Rebecca's doing the thing that overachievers do, which is try and overachieve at everything, every time that you are given a thing to do, to prove that you are not just the best, but like really make it clear you're taking something seriously, I think is part of Rebecca's concern. She's been given homework for her therapy. And she's just got that streak in her, which I can relate to, of just wanting to really do the most and get the gold star. And I just really understand that kind of frame of mind. It's not healthy, but thankfully her doctor kind of calls her out pretty quickly about that and is like, girl, look, I understand that you want to ace therapy, but that's just not how therapy really works. And I'm going to need you to come out of the bubble you've created for yourself, because she basically like buys all of these workbooks and does all of the exercises within them. And he tells her that she has been in a therapy bubble, and this will lead to her not remembering how to interact with the actual world, which I had never really heard it put like that because I haven't gone through this type of therapy. But I really could see how that would happen, you know? It's especially when you are somebody like me who likes to try to plan for everything. And there comes a point at which you can't. Now you have to just do it. And things aren't going to go to plan. That's just not how life is. And if all you can do is cling to your plans, as soon as things don't go that way, you're going to be adrift and not know how to handle it. So he's sort of emphasizing to her that she needs to do some things that are a little bit risky to get out there again and learn how to navigate less neat and tidy situations. So she decides to go with Paula. And Paula's dad is one of those dudes who is like, he's obviously a bastard in a lot of ways. He's like one of those dudes who's like generally intends well in a very broad sense, but he does a lot of harm in the language that he uses and the way he talks to people in his life. And he clearly does not think that that is anything to worry about or something serious. And we see how that's sort of eaten away at Paula. He treats her like she is, he says a couple of times some things about how Paula's practically a guy and how she should have been a linebacker. He even says something about like thinking that maybe she had a penis. And like up until that point, Rebecca's been sort of like, oh, he's funny, whatever. But as soon as he says that, she's like, all right, Paula, I'm sorry, never mind. And this relationship between Rebecca and Paula's dad, this is really like this is one of the things that I don't really relate to very much. She has this song called like My Best Friend's Dad, which ends, I should mention, with the most honest portion of it, in which he mentions how whenever he's alone, then he pictures Rebecca naked, which honestly, all I could think this entire time is how she sees him as a father figure. And I'm sure he's jerking off to her, because that is just how dirty old men work. But that's a whole aside. I don't react well to people who put down somebody that I care about. So her joking around and being pally with somebody who talks about Paula to her face the way that he does, I just don't think that I could do this. I am too protective of people. And this is part of me only having a few very close friends, because I don't expend that energy on being protective of people very easily. I choose a very few that I will go to bat for. And if you try and come for them, you had better find somewhere to hide, because it is not going to go well for you. And this has already happened with Owen, with a few people, where I have lashed out in response to how he's been treated. And he has had to rein me in, because I just go for it without really thinking about how he's going to feel about it, because I'm very protective. So the idea of somebody talking to a friend like this in front of me, and then me hanging out with them and continuing to like drink and generally have a pretty good time, I don't really see it. I am sure that this is a thing that other people can relate to. I think that part of my life experience is I don't have that many close friends who are still close to their parents. Most of my friends, I have never met their parents. So that might just be what it is. Like, this is something that really, I think, is more of an issue for people who are living near their friends, and a lot of times are living in the same place that they grew up. So these are high school friends whose parents that they knew from back when. Meeting your friend's parents, that's a rare thing. That happens at like weddings, and that's it. So I'm just curious if any of y'all have had that sort of, that sort of experience yourselves. And while I understood Rebecca's like instinct to look at this man, this messy, messy man, and see an opportunity to lean into the behavior that her therapist was kind of talking about, for me, I couldn't get behind it. It was like, he is a well-drawn character in that you can understand him still being likable despite being kind of repellent in a lot of the way he talks about people and his viewpoints. But I think I've reached a place personally where I just have no tolerance for this kind of shit anymore. And so this sort of thing has lost its charm for me, and I couldn't get past it. I couldn't laugh along. I couldn't just let it go, and so that kind of was a bit of a hindrance. However, it does lead to something interesting with Rebecca, in that she gets drunk, and she has a lot of instances this episode where she isn't sure what's allowed and not allowed because of the therapy that she's going through. So before she leaves, Nathaniel comes by, and she pretty much, like, there's a moment when they are making out and she has to stop, and she's like, I'm not actually sure if I'm able to have sex, considering what's going on here. That might not be allowed. And I was surprised that she stopped and thought about that, because past Rebecca, she has just avoided doing anything that's healthy for her so completely and so purposefully that the idea that she would stop and ask herself this question is just another moment of being like, oh my God, she's really taking this seriously. It's just a nice moment of like, good for you, girl, for actually like caring about that and considering that sort of thing. So she tells Nathaniel, like, look, I just don't know if I can do that. I'm going to take it slow. And she goes on ahead on this little trip with Paula, gets drunk with Paula's dad, and then begins to sext Nathaniel, which is great. This, honestly, in my opinion, that is the best way to handle this sort of situation where you're like, I really shouldn't get super involved, but I also am interested and I don't just want to put this person on a shelf and ignore them. I do wonder how the hell they're going to navigate this at work, though, because we haven't really seen any scenarios of Rebecca back at work. I don't know if she has taken her job back. I don't know what's going on with that. All we have seen is her at home still sort of recovering from what's happening. And I am assuming, perhaps incorrectly, that she is going to go back to the firm at some point. Now, there are a lot of places that have pretty strict rules about relationships between employees and supervisors or managers. This is a situation that I don't really know how that would work. It's not a large enough firm that I think there would be strict rules, that there would be like particular HR guidelines already outlined. And if there aren't, so maybe there's not recourse in the way that the office functions, but that doesn't mean that their interactions with one another aren't going to influence the way the office culture feels to other people. Like, people are going to know. And are there going to be people who begin to have a problem with the fact that perhaps she's getting special treatment? This is all hypothetical, because I, again, don't know that she's going back to the firm. I assume that she will, because not only does she, as a character, has she invested so much time there already, but purely from the standpoint of writing the show, we have too many characters that we've gotten to know from that location, and we can't just give them up, So her involvement with Nathaniel is just, it's one of those that I'm like very curious about it. And like, I want to watch its progress. I'm following with interest, but I can't help but be hyper aware of the power dynamic there and feel kind of a way about it. And there's a part of me that, I mentioned this before, that sort of misses how like unrepentantly cutthroat Nathaniel has been. And I need the show to come back to that a little bit, because as much as I am curious about the two of them, the behavior that we saw before didn't come from nowhere. That is ingrained in him to a point. And if he's going to reject behaving like that, I would like to see an episode of him making the conscious decision to try and be better and overcome some of that shit. Because so far, all we've seen is really him realizing that Rebecca means something to him and that he has feelings for her. And I don't want him to be a better person suddenly, simply because there's this woman in his life. It's just that trope is tired, and I trust that the show won't let that be all that it is. But I'm waiting for it, and I kind of had been thinking we're going to get it, and it still hasn't happened yet. So, yeah, I'm waiting, and we'll see. So, she is talking to Paula's dad at the end of the episode, just like basically not knowing where things are going. And Paula's dad kind of tells her, like, sometimes you just got to roll with it and let things be undecided and let them be what they are. And there is something to be said for certain people telling you that and you having to take it with a grain of salt because it's somebody who seems to have no ambition in the first place. But there is truth to that. There's only so much that we have control over. And we deserve to feel good as long as it's not hurting anybody else. And if the thing that, if sexting Nathaniel and having some drinks was a good time for her, as long as this doesn't become something that's like toxic or problematic for her, go for it. It's fine. So, and we also have a pretty nice moment of her mentioning to Paula's dad how smart Paula is and how good at all of this stuff she has become. And, I think she's still in school, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think she's graduated yet, has she? And her father having to sort of acknowledge that Paula is smarter than he thought and has some depths to her that he didn't realize were there. And that's the sort of thing I think as you get older, it becomes harder and harder because your parents still see you as you were when you were a teenager. They see you still locked in their minds as the person you were when you left home, or even maybe a little before you left home. And we continue to grow and drastically change. And yet our parents don't necessarily keep up with that. So when we go see them or we talk to them, they're still like mentally sort of speaking to the person that you used to be. And it can be really invalidating of your identity when you feel like you've made so much progress and somebody so close to you doesn't seem to see any of that at all. And I appreciated that as much as it kind of bothered me to see Rebecca like throwing in with this man. I appreciated at least that she sticks up for Paula in that regard. So let's talk about Paula and this guy, Jeff. Jeff, what is his name? His name is like Jeff Chatham or something that's like close enough to Chan that I was just like, really? Okay. Erica says Jeff Chamnington. Oh my God. That's honestly though, that's pretty funny. I'm not even like that mad about it. Channington. Oh my God. Channington. Thank you, Erica. Jeff Channington. And she has the same kind of like meet with him that Rebecca does when she first moves to Escovina and she sees Josh in the grocery store. Jeff is also there in the grocery store with like the cold fog of the freezer billowing around him. And I kind of thought maybe a woman would step out the way that Valencia did, but no, there is nobody with him. And when he sees her, he has a very come hither sort of vibe. I got to tell you guys, my alarm was going off so bad. I really kind of thought this dude was like fucking with her or married and like, she was going to find that out. I wasn't sure what it was, but I felt like there was just going to be some sort of like shit up his sleeve, and I was really pleased that that isn't how it goes. He asks her if she wants to get together and look at this old car because Paula knows a lot about cars. I don't remember if we knew that. It may have been mentioned. I can't emphasize enough how much I envy people who know about cars and yet how utterly unwilling I am to put in the barest amount of effort into learning about cars. It's one of those things like I admire it a lot. I know how useful it is practically. I wish so much that I was in a position to know more because I like know that it can be valuable to other people as well. And yet I can't give any shits about it. Not even a little bit. It just goes right in and out of my head. So he's showing her this car and there's like a kind of a lead up here because she is not telling Rebecca or her father where she's going. And Rebecca is so involved with Paula's father that she doesn't really notice the first time that Paula comes home wanting to talk, and Rebecca leaves her to her own devices and sort of forgets about her. And I got very worried here about whether we were going back into Rebecca not paying attention to Paula and not pulling her own weight in relationships. I was so happy later when that is addressed and Rebecca is just like, man, this isn't fair. We don't need to be like this. You don't need to be my mom. That's not a good or healthy dynamic for either one of us. Because I really didn't think I wanted Rebecca to do better in that way. And I kind of thought that she was going in that direction. But then when she just sort of is like, yeah, I'll be there in a second, and then totally passes out, I was like, really, Rebecca? Come on. And I was just really relieved that the show lets her fuck up, but then realize that she did. They don't have her immediately stopping the behavior that's like, not great, but they have her immediately learning from it after the fact. And that's the main thing. You can't be perfect, but if you can acknowledge what you did, that's the thing. That's all we ask most of us is like, I want you to genuinely understand that was hurtful. I want you to really see why that kind of was fucked up. Erica says, did you notice how these two ladies matched the clerks at the West Covina market? Yes, I did. The black woman is meant to be a counterpart to Marty, and the white woman is grocery clerk with half an eyelid. Oh, I didn't notice the half an eyelid counterpart. I did notice the black woman having the fro like the other dude, Marty. And yeah, we have this like song about how this is the first penis she saw with the word Jeff on all of the supplies in the background of this like whole scene. Everything, all of the like cleaning stuff, everything has the word Jeff instead of any sort of like brand on it. And it's really funny. And yeah, that song is one of those weird ones where it's like, it feels so juvenile in a way, but it's also, that is such an important moment, is like the first sexual experience that you have with somebody. So while there's a big part of me that was just kind of like, oh my God, are we really doing this? Another part of me was like, yeah, though, like that is how I think of my boyfriend from high school, is like, oh yeah, that's the first guy I had sex with. Like, that was just such a major part of our relationship, was both of us figuring out sex and constantly having sex. Oh my God. Guys, sometimes I wish I could bottle that horniness and like get it back. And other times I'm so glad to be rid of it. It's really, I can't decide. Erica says, there's a great video of the song's premiere with all the cast. It's the first time many of them had heard the song or seen the video, and it's so cute. Vinny is just shocked and taken aback. Yeah, I feel like there is such an emphasis on men's experiences when it comes to sex and coming of age. Talking about the first pair of tits a guy has seen is so like de rigueur that we don't really even bat an eyelid to a point about it. But a woman talking about the first dick she ever saw is really seen as this sort of transgressive thing. And it's just amazing how, I mean, it's the whole WAP issue, right? We've got so many rappers singing about their dicks. I mean, so many. But a couple of women rap about their pussies, and all of a sudden it's this like front page story, news at 11, to hide your children sort of situation. So yeah, she comes home obviously kind of feeling like a little bit torn on seeing this dude again and getting his number. And she dresses up and goes to see him and she goes to see him the first night. She doesn't dress up. She just shows up in what it is that was wearing at the grocery store. And the next night that she goes to see him, Rebecca notices that she's all dressed up and is like, oh, where are you going? And she says to church, and Rebecca like buys it because she's just not really paying attention. And while she's with him, there's just a lot of, it's unclear if it's like real sparks, or if it's just her being enchanted with this guy who used to be, because you can easily mistake your putting your baggage on somebody for what's actually going on. And for his part, he finally admits to her that he always regrets giving her up because he dumped her. And there's this moment where it sort of looked like maybe she was going to cheat on her husband. And instead, it turns out that really all she wanted was to know that he regretted it. That's all that she needed, was him to be like, I fucked up. That was a bad call. And as soon as he says that, she is able to sort of pull away from him without really looking like it hurts or costs her anything. And I have to say, I really appreciated his reaction when she says, all right, well, I gotta go. I felt that he was going to lash out a little bit. And instead, I mean, granted, her father does show up with a shotgun, but he doesn't seem as angry as I kind of thought he might. And there's a part of me that respects that. Like, he sort of recognizes that letting her go is a mistake that he can't just undo. And that seems fair to him, like, yep, well, I did give you up, and I guess I can't just like tell you, hey, I'm really sorry 30 years later and get you back. Like, that makes sense. And this leads to the conversation later with Rebecca, where she admits, I've just been so caught up in thinking about what my life could have been like if I had been with him, that I was treating my husband as a sort of consolation prize because there was somebody else that I actually wanted and he didn't want me. And I always felt like, what if? And I have to pay some more respect to my husband because, this is somebody I really care about. And I realize that it's not about Jeff anymore. I'm not really into Jeff. It's just been this like weird beacon in my mind. And that's something that I get, All right. So now we're going to talk about Josh, the bartender. Y'all. I don't know what's happening. I'm not sure why the show is driving his story in this direction. I'm really curious about it. But this was really tough. Before I quite get into that, I'm going to mention Daryl and White Josh, because they play a role in what happens at the bar, because that's where their conversations happen. So we have Daryl and his daughter, who is great. I love her. And she seems to be very aware of how much her father wants a baby, more even than he's willing to admit to himself, and is essentially like, you have got to face the fact that if you want a baby, being with this guy is not going to work out. That's not going to make you happy long term. So I know it sucks, but you're going to have to rip this Band-Aid off and break up. And she sort of tricks the two of them into meeting up at the bar while there's a baby shower happening, so that the two of them are forced to talk about this issue. I loved this scene between him and White Josh so much. The combination of reasons. One, because of the fact that his daughter sort of tricked them and how much that worked. Two, because White Josh is, because he's younger and hotter, no offense, Daryl, but I mean, he is. And seems to be so much more of a, quote, catch than Daryl is. I think there's just this intrinsic assumption that if anybody's going to dump anybody, White Josh is going to dump Daryl, you know? And that's not to say that when Daryl makes his, like, case for the fact that he's a catch, he is wrong, because he is. But there is just a superficiality to the way that we see dynamics in relationships that we assume the hot one has the upper hand and is going to be the one to dump the other person. And there's almost a sense of White Josh having that assumption as well, because Daryl's mid-dump and White Josh still doesn't seem to really see that that's what's happening right now. And once he figures it out and catches on, and he doesn't like, it's not even like just this like emotional devastation. It's mostly shock of realizing like, oh, that's where we are. That's what's happening. Oh my God. I have not caught on. Shit. And I really like the whole way that scene played. It was so different than most breakup scenes I've seen before. It's just really, there's so much affection still, and there isn't this like heavy drama to the thing. It's Daryl being like, look, I'm not trying to give you an ultimatum. You don't want this. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that it has grown in importance to me. This used to be sort of a thing that, like, hypothetically I would have been into. And now it's something that I really want. And this has just led me to the inescapable conclusion that we can't continue to be together because these are not compatible situations. It's handled so logically, but still with so much compassion and love between the two of them. I just really, really appreciated that. So then we have like this moment a little bit later where they don't really know how to like navigate this. Josh asks him, well, can we still be friends? And Daryl says, I love that idea, but that sounds really hard right now. I just don't see at the moment how to do that. And that's 1000% valid. I am not a person who can go from being a romantic interest and then friends with somebody. I can eventually be friends and it'll be like, fine if you give me a lot of time, but I can't do that immediately like some people can do. And I liked that Daryl admits that without making it sound like, you know, he's just not, there's not drama with it. And yet Hector comes in and tells the two of them to stick around. And the two of them are both like, yeah, okay, in a way that makes me feel like they are accidentally going to end up being friends. Maybe not even quite breaking up because they begin to realize how much they do mean to one another. I don't know if that is true because like, if Daryl's telling the truth and he really wants this baby and Josh is super not interested in compromising, not even compromising, just like changing his entire life. I don't know how you get past that. So I don't see them really being able to stay together, but I would love it if they could continue to stay friends. It would be really cute. Because they have a great dynamic between the two of them, you know, and it doesn't have to be romantic for it to be fun. So Josh, he's trying to figure out how to adult, if we're going to use millennial speak. I didn't really mention Maya and her millennial speak a couple of episodes ago because it was really embarrassing to watch and listen to, but they made some good points there. But Josh is not, he just doesn't know what to do with himself. He doesn't have a job, as it turns out. Like that suspension, apparently, like I guess is just permanent. Like he's just not going to work there anymore. I don't know. And he gets offered a job at home base, which that was something that Greg mentioned to him, and he laughed in Greg's face and said, I'm not that desperate. But now he's like, well, maybe I am that desperate. So he begins to learn how to bartend. And he's just, if Josh were a bartender at a gay bar, I feel like he would clean up. He has just, first of all, he's jacked. Second of all, he has that like upbeat energy that's really good for a nightclub situation. You know, you want somebody who feels like they are just high energy. And the fact that he is so interested in putting on a kind of performance, I feel like would just really suit that sort of place. So, and also he has extremely over the top bad fashion sense, which I feel like if you are going to showcase bad fashion, a nightclub is the place for it. Like, it's just, people aren't going to be as judgmental in that setting because folks go over the top with what they wear. And I don't even just mean like gay nightclubs, just nightclubs, period. I mean, God knows. So there's a part of me that's like, this isn't a terrible idea for Josh as a job. I just don't think home base is the place for it, for him, you know? But he's really feeling himself as he starts like doing this like double shaker routine, and this girl comes in, and I cannot stop laughing at Heather's response to Josh's antics because she is just not really interested in the showmanship thing. She's like, this doesn't suit where we're at. People just want beers. What are you doing, dude? Like, I mean, Heather is pretty much, when it comes to work, she's like bare minimum effort girl. So I think that's part of it as well. It's just her watching somebody put a lot of effort and sincerity into this kind of job. I don't think she gets it. And this girl is sort of into him, and they make a date, and he starts to develop a zit on his face, and he tries to pop it and he can't. But apparently when he tries, he infects it. So we see him later in the episode with this horrifying, like, cyst on his face. And he is desperately attempting to ignore it, which I'm just like, as soon as you see that, go into the bathroom, pop it, pour antibiotic into it, put a Band-Aid on it. There's no reason to keep on behaving like that's not there, dude. What are you doing? But he doesn't do that. So this girl comes back in. She sees it on his face and is like, what? You can see on her, like, just the revulsion. And then he boggles the catch on one of the shakers. It hits it, the cyst on his face, which pops it and shoots the pus into the drink that he just made. This show isn't huge on gross out humor usually, but that might be one of the grossest things I've ever seen on television. That was so revolting that my entire body just contracted into a ball, and I could not open my eyes for like 30 seconds after. It's just so horrifying. I just hate it so much. And you know, it's funny because I am like the pimple popper. I don't watch those pimple popper videos because watching it doesn't have the satisfaction. I need to do it. But Owen gets very irritated with me because if I see one on his back, I'm like, stop, let me get this. And he's just like, no, stop. It hurts. Leave it alone. And I need to get it. So in that respect, this sort of thing, one would think, but I can't handle looking at it and not being able to do anything about it. And the fact that he chooses to just behave as if everything's fine when we can see the staph infection happening on your face. I don't know. Is this supposed to be a sort of metaphor for him ignoring the fact that he isn't an adult? Like the fact that he is putting off dealing with a very obvious issue in favor of just dating and joking around and trying to be cool. is that what's happening there? Because I was like, I feel like they're trying to say something here, but I don't really know what it is. And I'm not sure if I'm just reading too much into it. There's also a part of me that was like, are they trying to take away a little bit of Josh's like attractiveness? Because his go-to MO when he's like feeling down is to get involved in a relationship. And are they trying to do a thing that makes him sort of like closes the door on a girl that he was interested in right away? I don't feel like that could be it, because he puts the Band-Aid on, another girl comes in and he'll just flirt with that girl. I feel like this has to be something about him realizing something about himself, but I'm not sure if it happened or not. It wasn't super clear. The only thing I will say is that watching his friends watch him and really get into the embarrassment of him performing the way that he does is so funny to me. It's really like, it's got the same vibes as him doing this like mall model, that episode where he is dumped by what's her face with the eyebrows. So what I'm saying is I don't know where they're going with Josh Chan's story, and I'm very interested to see it, because I had said from the start, Rebecca, as much as she was a hot mess, in terms of managing to get through her life in a practical sense, she was doing really well. She had a job, she had money, she had a place of her own, she paid her bills. It's not like she was super great with everything, because we know that she like ran out of money and didn't even notice kind of situation. But overall, she was doing better than Josh Chan, who it just felt like never really had a grip on his life and just seemed very immature. So, and he admits, like he doesn't have anywhere to live. Like he just doesn't really know what he's doing. I just don't really know if I'm missing a major like tie-in between this instance of him like ignoring this infection and him refusing to grow up. And so if anybody has any theories on that, I am open to hearing them. So the episode ends with, first we have Paula talking to her husband and basically apologizing for not being there and getting much more invested in their relationship. And then we have Rebecca meeting with her therapist and telling him all of the things that she did to get out of the therapy bubble. And he actually is very approving. I kind of wondered if he wasn't going to tell her that she was trying to overachieve at getting out of the bubble, to be honest. But I really appreciated the follow-up where she says, my whole life I've only known how to be really good or really bad. Being a human is this sort of in-between place that I haven't been comfortable in, and it's very scary. It's making mistakes. But it's also cool. So he says you get an A+ on your C+, and lets her pick a sticker, which I just thought was great. I loved this so much. It smells like grape. And yeah, I mean, relatable. I am also an extremist. I am all or nothing. And I recently read in this book by Nia Shanks, who is a weightlifter, and she does this program that I'm following right now. She talks about how so often we'll make a mistake in our day and we'll sort of throw the rest of the day away and feel like, well, fuck it. Well, I may as well just like mess up extra then, because I already screwed up. So there's a mark on the day. And she says, she made a really nice metaphor there. And she was like, if you were stuck in a hole, would you dig further? Would you get out a shovel and continue to dig? Because that's all you're doing. You're not solving anything. You're just making it harder for yourself to get out of it later. Throwing the whole day away, that's not the only option. And even though it kind of feels like, well, that sucks, that was an imperfect day, maybe it was an imperfect day. Guess what? They all are. And you just kind of have to learn how to live in that space and be okay with that. It's tough. It is when you are a perfectionist and an overachiever, that is an incredibly, not just uncomfortable, but so deeply unfamiliar that it's like you don't even know how, you know? So I really liked the ending of this episode with her just like putting the grape scented sticker on her shirt and being very proud of herself. I just really liked it. It's a nice uplifting moment considering how tough these episodes had been. And I'm excited to see what happens next. All right. Well, I'm going to go. I am so sorry again, Megan, for starting late, but it seems like everything wound up working out. Fingers crossed. I shouldn't even say that out loud. And I hope that you guys are enjoying the coverage. I will be seeing you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.